Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Nicola Migliore. I am the Product Development Manager for the Vcad project, and today I will be showing you a few reporting scenarios using the new markers that we have recently released in the new Forge version of the Vcad Custom Visual just last week. At the end of the presentation, we will have a brief Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please write them in the question panel and we will try to get to all of them at the end of the presentation. Also, the completed reports that we create today will be published and shared during the presentation, so keep an eye on the chat for the upcoming links. With all of this said, let's jump into creating our reports. So for today's presentation, I've set up a webinar starter PBIX file. This is a very simple Power BI report which I've created starting from one of Vcad's standard custom templates. All I did was create this template based on a Revit file of an office building. Particularly, I extracted the information from a phase of my Revit file. This is because in the later example, we will need access to the rooms, so I needed to create a template based on a phase and not based on a view. In any case, all I've really done with the report, as you can see, is I've cleared out some of the report tabs, which we won't be needing today. And also, I've done a few data transformations to create a new data set, which is this rooms table, which basically is simply a copy of the Vcad assets table, which I filtered for the category rooms. We've gone in depth onto how and why we do these transformations in previous webinars, so I won't go into too much detail today. Just know that we have this new data set called rooms, which represents all the rooms in my office building. Now let's have a look at the actual report we want to create. Today we're talking about markers, and one of the most intuitive examples of use of markers is an IoT scenario. And in particular, we're going to be looking at monitoring temperature readings coming from thermostats installed in my building. So if we have a very quick look at what my base report page is, this is the classic asset detail page. This is my office building. I'm going to start out by duplicating this page, renaming this to temp because we're looking at temperatures. Okay, and let's actually have a look at what information of the model we need from this. So as I said, we're looking at thermostats. In this case, in my BIM file, we have modeled some thermostats. And we can actually have a look at them if we filter the family for a thermostat. We have this thermostat new, which if we have a look at, we can look into X-ray mode. We can see they're kind of hard to see. They're very tiny. And they're partially embedded inside of walls. So even if I zoom in very close to my actual object, which you can see here, they're kind of hard to see. I could go and hide everything that isn't selected. However, in this case, what I end up doing is I lose a bunch of context information about where the thermostat actually is. So I would like a way to highlight my thermostat and ideally be able to interact with it within my model without losing that contextual information. One of the handy tools we have is these markers. So why don't we go ahead and activate them in our report. So to do that, we can simply select a custom visual. Let's go ahead and show the entirety of the model. We're going to select a custom visual and then head on over to the Format Your Visual section. In here, we have a new section called Markers. We can go ahead and toggle this on. You can see markers immediately appear. And also, before I close this, I want to expand the marker panel. And I'm going to enable on start. This means that when I reload the page, the markers will be immediately loaded. And I can actually make sure that works by changing tabs and coming back. Let's go ahead and we can remove this. We're not interested in this title. We can maybe stretch the custom visual and we can make sure that the markers load in when I switch tabs and come back over. Okay, and also we'll be changing a little the rest of the report in a moment. So for now, we can see, okay, the markers loaded in immediately. So I now know where my thermostats are. However, now everything looks the same. We want some more information to be able to differentiate through the various thermostats and through the various markers. So a nice feature of the markers is that they're automatically natively connected to the tooltipping engine that we have. So what we can do is we can, again, select our custom visual, head on over to the data bindings, and have a look on the bottom. Here we have our tooltip bindings. Here I can drag some information to distinguish one marker from another. So for example, I can extend here the assets data set, and let's simply drag in the name. So this will be the name of my thermostat. So if I hover over my markers, I can see here I have the name of the thermostat. The names are kind of similar. They all have codes. Probably could have used something a little more differentiating, but for our purposes right now, these are perfectly fine. Okay, so now I have my markers in here. Let's go ahead and try and make them a little more interesting. So for now, they're just all white. Why don't we try and differentiate them a little? So I can do that by going here and using my IoT toolbar, and I can head on over to marker settings. First of all, I can also show you we have some simple interactions with our markers right here. So we can easily toggle them on and off, and you can switch them from an all in front mode to an occluded view. This basically places the markers inside of the geometric space of the model, which means that they'll be hidden behind other geometries. You can see them kind of peeking out behind a couple of the windows. In most scenarios, you'll want them always in front, but keep in mind this is a possibility depending on what your scenario is. If you want to customize a little markers, we can head out on over to the marker settings. And here you see we have a few defaults. So temperature, humidity, and CO2. We're going to go ahead and remove humidity and CO2. We're not going to need them today, but we will keep temperature because our example is monitoring temperature. And if we want to have a look at what the actual marker setting looks like, we can go into edit, and we can see that we have a type, temperature. We have a sprite image for the normal state and for the highlighted state, and also the possibility to apply colors both for the normal state and for the highlighted state to my icons. Okay, so I said I wanted to try and customize the markers. One of the things we can do is we can actually change the icons we're using. So to do that, we can go ahead and upload a new marker icon. Let's just press new. We're going to put a marker for the temperature, and I'm going to upload a file. Specifically, I'm using an SVG file. This is the suggested file format. It scales very well and it's light, so it's good to use inside of a report where you may have hundreds or thousands of markers running. So I'm just going to load my thermometer SVG. You can see here I have it. I'm going to save. And then we're going to go back to the temperature style, and I'm going to set the icon for my marker. Now I can save and save again. Okay, so now we've set up a marker style. However, we haven't told Vcad that it's supposed to use it for the markers that we're rendering right now. To do that, what I need to do is I need to, again, select the custom visual, go over to the data bindings, and at this point, I want to find the marker style field. Here, I want to pass in an information that tells my my model which marker it's supposed to render. So to do that, I can simply drag in some information which I need to pull from an external data source. So let's go ahead and add this new data source here at the get data. I'm going to import a CSV file, my temperature reading CSV file. As always, this works the same with an external database, an Excel file, CSV file, anything goes. My data set here is fairly simple. I have an external ID, which will be the external ID of my thermostats. And I also have a timestamp, the temperature that was recorded on any given date. And then I have a last column, which is sensor type, which is always temperature for everyone. this is the column that we're going to use to tell Vcad which markers it's supposed to render. For now, let's just load this in. Once it's loaded inside of the report, we're going to make sure that it has been correctly connected to the rest of my data set. So I can go over here to model, find my new temperature readings table, drag this over. Let's just see, let's make a little room here. We won't need these tables today. Here we go. And we can have a look at the temperature readings, which has been connected to my assets table correctly using the external ID, which is exactly what I wanted. So now if I go back to my report, let's change a little the report so that we can review this new data. So in my assets list, I'm not interested in category, family, and symbol. I know I'm only looking at thermostats because I filtered them. Here, it might be more interesting to have, for example, the timestamp, which we can keep as a simple timestamp, and then we can add the temperature. Okay, perfect. So here now I know on each day what my readings were. And also another thing we can do is we can clear out some more space, maybe move this over. We'll keep this filter for now because it helps us filter out the thermostats. Maybe make this slightly bigger, remove, or we can actually just go ahead and resize this and change it. Instead of the symbol in here, I want to be filtering based on the timestamp. Well, no, maybe let's just drop it back in, which will be faster. Okay, so here I want to be reviewing my timestamp. Okay. I get an interval selection, which is perfect. You can go ahead and resize everything so it looks a little neater. Okay, so this allows us, of course, to filter based on the date. So I can filter my information here. And I can focus in on a single date or review the data over a certain period. Also, we can add this information to the tooltip that we're now rendering inside of our model very simply by going here over to the tooltip and just adding in, again, the timestamp, which we will keep as a simple timestamp, and then the temperature. Okay, so now when we hover over our markers, we can see the date that we're looking at and the temperature. And if we have multiple days, we'll have multiple data sets, data groups showing me the temperatures on the various dates that are in our range. Okay. Now I said we needed to load in the data so that we could tell Vcad which markers it's supposed to render. Specifically, I was referring to the sensor type column over here, which as you see is always temperature with a capital T, which you may notice is spelled exactly the same as temperature here. This is important because what we're going to be doing is we're going to select our custom visual, go over to the data bindings, and as I was saying in the marker style section, here we're going to drag in our sensor type. Okay, now we can switch tabs and come back over again. And now when the model is loaded, the markers will be automatically activated because we told it to load in the markers at startup, and we should have our icons being loaded in. Okay, so now you can see we have our little thermostats, thermometer icons. Let's go ahead and they're a little hard to make out like this. Let's edit them a little more. So if we go to the marker settings, we can now play around with the style, which we have correctly connected to the model. For example, we can go ahead and change the color. Let's find something that'll pop out from my red building. So I could do a nice teal would work. Activate this, and also we can change the size of the icons. So instead of 24, let's bring it up to 36 will do. We can save, and now again switch tabs and come back. And maybe here on the bottom we can remove this list, which we're not interested in. Maybe add a bar chart, which we can make slightly smaller. Okay, you can see my markers now are way more distinguishable, they're larger, and they pop out from my red building, so they're more easy to identify. Again, when I hover over, I get all this information. Let's finish setting up this bar chart real quick, and then we'll show you something more that we can do with our markers. So in here, we're just going to go through over time. We're going to iterate over time for the x-axis. For the y-axis, let's have a look at the temperature. And maybe instead of this is the sum, we're not interested. Let's check out the minimum temperature and maybe drag in another couple temperatures here. So we can see we want the minimum temperature, we want the average temperature, and then the maximum temperature. So for every day, we know how the temperature readings have gone overall in my building. Okay, so we now have our markers. They're more interesting to look at. However, we'd like to be able to gain immediately insight from our model without having to even go and hover over the markers before we get information. So to do that, what we can do is we can apply a little data transformation and use that to enhance our model representation. So let's start. Ideally, what we'd like to do is sort of what we're used to doing in Vcad by applying themes and colors to the geometries in our model. However, we want to do that with our markers. So let's head on over to the transform data section. Okay, and here in my temperature readings, I can go ahead and update the data set by adding a new column. I'm going to add a conditional column, which I'm going to call, I can call this temp color. Okay, and I'm going to say that if the temperature is lesser than, let's do 19.5 degrees, I'm going to call this cold for my office. I'm going to give it a blue, light blue tint. I can add another condition and say that if instead the temperature is greater than, let's say, 22 degrees, of course these are Celsius, I'm going to call this warm for my office, so I can give it a orange reddish tint. And in every other case, I'm going to say I'm in a good threshold, so I can just put it to green. Now we can go ahead and confirm we've created our new column. We can go ahead and close and apply. We're done for now. Okay, now let's check out this new column we've created, make sure it works correctly. In our assets list, we don't care about this sensor type. It's the same for everyone, so we can remove it. Instead, we want to see our new temperature color. For a temperature color, we can do some quick conditional formatting. I'll go fast here. I'm sure everyone's familiar with this. I'm just going to feed the field value to the column and tell it to use it for the background and for the font color. So field value, go ahead. Okay, and so now here we see the new column is correctly created. I'm actually passing in color codes that are correctly working. So I have my blue, green, and red for the various values. So now that we've categorized the entries and we've created a color to combine to that categorization, we can now apply it to the markers. It's really simple. Just like you would do with creating new themes, we can simply pass in the color to a field to the marker color here. So we can pull in the temperature color and we can apply it, and you can see we immediately have our new markers, which are updated, and we can see the color based on our categorization. So if I hover over this marker, I already know that it's going to be a low temperature. We have 18 degrees here, while this one will be a warm temperature. We have our 22.69 over here. Okay, so now we're reviewing the information on a single date. However, we have an interval, so we could want to review the information for multiple days all at once. If we hover over the marker now, we can see we have the two data sets like I was showing you before. And you'll notice that the markers switched, that they changed color because they're rendering the information for the latest row of data that has been passed. what this means is if we hover over this marker, you see we have two different data sets. So the first one for the 26th of May, we have 21.15 degrees, whereas for the 27th, we have 19.19 degrees. If we were to see the data that is being passed to the custom visual through these fields as a table, as rows, the second row would be 19 degrees for this specific marker. Now, in some scenarios, you may want to have more control over which marker is being rendered. So for example, if you have a real-time report, you need a way to differentiate which marker is being rendered if you have multiple entries for a single device. So to do that, we can, this is a bit more of an advanced topic, but let's just touch upon it so everyone knows that it's possible and that there is a possibility of configuration here. So we're going to select our custom visual and head over to the formatting options. Under the marker section, the last option is the marker filter mode. As a default, it's set to none. So simply, if one asset has multiple marker entries, simply the last one will be rendered, like in this case. The last one received will be rendered. If we want to enforce a better control, what we can do is we can set up either to render based on the last timestamp. So this is particularly useful if you have a real-time report that is receiving data in packages, in package dumps. Basically, what happens usually in those scenarios is you have multiple packages sent over time. Each package has the entries for multiple readings and has a timestamp. You may want to only review the data coming from the latest package. This option is how you would do that. Another opportunity is that you don't care when the data came in, you just want to see the latest information for each object. This is achieved through the last per GUID filter, which is more our case. So we always want to see the information for every marker. We just want the latest. So we're going to select this. And right now, nothing is really changing because you need to pass some more information to the custom visual for it to work. So we want to go back to the data bindings. And we need to tell basically what's happening now with that filter option is Vcad is going to look at all the data it received. It's going to group all of the entries based on a GUID, which is the marker GUID, and then it's going to render only the latest marker for that, for each GUID. So for starters, we need to feed it a GUID. In this case, we're rendering a marker for each thermostat. So simply something that uniquely identifies a thermostat will do fine for us. In our case, it's really simple. It's the external ID of our thermostats, and we can pull it either from the temperature readings or from the assets table. It's exactly the same. Let's just pull it from the temperature readings. Okay, perfect. And then we need to give it time information because we said we want the latest data for each GUID. So for that, we need to populate the IoT timestamp. And again, it's very simple. We already have this information. It's our timestamp field, which we don't want as a hierarchy. We want as a full timestamp. Okay, now what's happening is Vcad is grouping all of the data it received based on the GUID that we passed, so based on the external ID of the asset, i.e. based on every thermostat, and it's filtering out only the marker related to the latest timestamp. So if we navigate through time, you can see that down here, these two markers are blue or green, sorry. The following day, they become blue. If we have a look at the data sets that we received, in fact, on the 26th, which is the timestamp that we're feeding to filter, we had 21 degrees, whereas on the 27th, we had 19 degrees. And this way, we're able to ensure that we're always rendering the correct marker for each object. As I said, this is slightly more of an advanced topic and case scenarios to have a look at, but it's something to keep in mind that is a possibility. Okay, so this kind of covers our first example using markers. We could get a little more elaborate. We could hook up a tooltip a report page to the markers that shows more graphs and more information. But for now, this is good. This is showing us the functionality and some of what we can do. So we can go ahead and save our report. I'm going to do a save as. I'm going to save it in my folder here. I'm going to save it as temperature. Okay, perfect. And now we can just simply publish this. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we can replace it. And you'll be receiving the link in the chat right now. Okay, so now we can go ahead and close this report, and we're going to jump in right away with the next scenario I want to show you today. So we can close this. Then we're going to start from our webinar starter again, which again is simply a stripped down version of the report template, of the classic report template, in which we've done a little data transformation. Okay, so let's have a look at, let's go ahead and duplicate this page right away. And in this second scenario, we're going to be looking at an occupancy use case. So basically, we have the same office building that we were looking at before. And let's imagine for my company, we have a hybrid work situation. So basically, my employees can choose to either work from home or work from the office. However, if they're going to work from the office, they need to reserve a workstation because we have a limited number of desks. That's the basic idea. To make sure that this works, we're going to need, as I said before, well, not here, sorry. We're going to need, as I said before, the rooms data set. And also, I forgot to mention, I have connected the rooms data set to the Vcad levels data set. It's super simple. I already had the object ID, so I just connected the two. So let's start actually setting up our report. So for starters, we want to be looking at the rooms and not at every single little geometry in my model. So let's go ahead and select my custom visual and change the field I'm passing to the object ID. So right now I'm giving it the object ID pulling from the Vcad assets table, which however includes every asset in the model. I don't want this, so I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to drag in the object ID coming from my rooms table. The same goes for this asset list. This is now showing me all of the assets in my model. I'm not interested in those. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these. And for now, all I really care about is my room name. Oh, and another slight transformation I did, I created this clean room name. This is simply, it's simply a better formatted name for the rooms than the one I had as a default. Just simply call this room. Okay, so here I have all my different rooms. If I want to see them in my model, I can see now we're actually looking at the volumes of all of my rooms. And actually, for my report, it'll be more useful to always be in X-ray mode. So I can just go ahead and set that up as a default by going to the formatting options, PBI data to viewer section, and then telling it X-ray not selected should be my default. So now, even if when I change tabs or when I reload the model, the report, this will be the preset default. Another thing that I want to do is to be able to focus in on a level by level basis. So why don't we go ahead and clear out some room here. We don't need all of these filters. What I can simply do is I can add a slicer in here. I could have kept one of those, but I guess it's the same. I'm going to keep a slicer, and here I'm going to pull from my levels table. Okay, let's copy some of the style here. Okay, this looks better. Okay, so here now I have my levels table, so I can go ahead and filter out the levels. However, I actually want to section the model and update the model based on my selections. So to do that, I can select my custom visual, head on over to the formatting option, and here I can activate my floor filter. And then in the data binding, I can feed to my floor filter field my level name. Okay, and now I make selections. You can see that the model is actually cut and focused in on the level that I'm actually reviewing. Okay, perfect. And conveniently, it also cuts the top of the rooms, so I can sort of peek inside of the volumes of my rooms, which is pretty handy. Okay, so we've done this initial setup for the report. Let's go ahead and import some external data that we're going to be using. So again, I'm going to go to my Get Data section. I'm going to import another CSV file, and I'm importing my occupancy CSV. This, you can imagine being a connection to a live database where I have all of my room reservations. The data set is very simple. I have an external ID, which in this case will be the external ID of my rooms. I have a timestamp for the various dates. And for each room, I have a capacity and the actual occupancy. So how many workstations have been reserved. Let's go ahead and load this in. Okay, and now we can start by displaying this information in the rest of our report. So here in my asset list, I can go ahead and add my timestamp, kind of like what we did before. But in this case, I'm also going to add the capacity and the occupancy. Okay. Also, it may be useful to have an overall idea of what the situation is. So let's just add a card or two right over here. Okay, and we're going to say, okay, I want to see the capacity. Again, let's copy the style. And then we can simply copy and paste this, and we're going to review also the occupancy. So instead of the capacity, we're going to look at the occupancy. Okay, great. These numbers are kind of crazy because now we're reviewing the information for every date. So you can see for office room 4010, we actually are looking at all the dates. So let's add a filter for the dates. We can do that up here. We are, of course, going to be using our timestamp. Okay, this is fine. Sorry about that. Okay, and so now let's actually keep this as a list, and we can focus on a single date because we actually just want to make a reservation for a specific date. Okay, so capacity of 41 and occupancy of 20. On the following floor, capacity of 40 and occupancy of 16. Okay, this makes much more sense. Okay, great. So now let's start adding in our markers so that we can actually review this information inside of the model and help our users get some contextual information. So again, for the markers, really simple. We're going to go over to the formatting options, toggle on the markers, enable them on start. Okay, and now we have our markers inside of our model. Let's get some information in the tooltip. So in the data binding, we're going to scroll down to the tooltips, and we're going to be reading, for example, the room name, which again, I'll rename to room. Here we go. And so now I know what each room is. And next to the room, I'm going to go ahead and drop in the capacity. And actually, let's also put in the timestamp again, because I want to know what date I'm reviewing. Capacity, and then the occupancy. Okay, so now these are my actual available offices. And when I hover over the office, I know, okay, this room on the 30th has a capacity of 2 and an occupancy of 1, which is good. It means there is room. Whereas this one is completely empty. We have an occupancy of 0. And this one instead is completely full, so I cannot reserve a workstation in this room. Okay, we have some functionality here. However, it takes a while for me to know where there is availability. Ideally, I'd like to have this information immediately, just by looking at a glance. So we can do that by doing a little data transformation and setting up some marker styles. So let's start from the data transformation. So if we head on over to transform data, Here we can set up an occupancy status. So we want to be able to immediately know if the room is empty or if it's full or something like that. So we're gonna go ahead and add another column to our data set. We're gonna again add a conditional column, which we're gonna call status. And we're gonna say, okay, so if the capacity is equals to 0, no, sorry, not the capacity. If the occupancy is equals to 0, it means no one is in the room. So we can call the room empty. If the occupancy is equals to, right now we're just gonna put in -1. We're gonna change this in a moment. We're gonna say the room is full. In every other case, we're gonna say the room is occupied. It would be partially occupied, but just let's keep it brief and just call it occupied. I'm gonna say okay, now you can see some of the rooms are empty, some are occupied, however, they're never full. That's an easy fix. Up here, what we want to say is actually the occupancy is equals to the capacity. Here we go. Then the room is full. You can see here, there we go. The room has capacity of 4, occupancy of 4, so it's obviously full. Okay, that's it. We're good to go. So let's close this up. Okay, perfect. Let's add the information to my assets list, for example. So we can add in the status over here. We can see if the room is full, empty, occupied, and so on. Okay, and now let's use this information in our markers. So let's head on over to the IoT toolbar and set up some marker settings. We can throw all these styles away. We're not interested in them this time. And let's start by loading in some icons. So first case will be the empty room. I can go ahead and load in my empty SVG. Here we go. Next up is the occupied room. For that, I have my single person. Here we go. So that's my employee. And finally, I have my full room. Person multiple. There we go. Kind of a crowded space. Okay, now let's do the same for the styles. So again, empty. I'm going to select the empty icon. Empty means I'm good to reserve a workstation. So let's give it a nice green and save. Next up, occupied. I'm going to say here, my occupied icon. Occupied, I'm still good to go. Not quite as good as green, but a nice blue will do. And save. And then finally, I'm going to do my full room with my full icon. Full, I'm going to do this sort of orange reddish because, of course, it means I can't reserve the room. Okay, and we're pretty much done. We can save. We can connect the data binding. So again, in the marker style here, I'm going to drag in my status. Okay, switch tabs and come back again. Okay, perfect. Now I have my icons. So let's first of all make them slightly bigger. We can resize this. I don't know, let's go crazy. 40, 46, 46 will be fine. And also, I notice here that the green isn't really standing out from my green highlight. Now I'm not particularly interested in the highlight of the object in this specific case. So I can go ahead and update the highlight color to something a little more discreet by going to the format section under viewer options, and here my selection default color. Let's do like this gray will do. Switch tabs and come back again. And now when I'm actually reviewing my data, here we go, I immediately know which rooms are certainly full, so I can't even look at them, which ones are completely empty, so I'm free to go, or which ones are partially occupied. So for example, I can then investigate. This room has a capacity of 3, occupancy of 1. Okay, there's 2 free desks. In this case, capacity of 4, occupancy of 1 is actually 3 free desks. Maybe I want to stretch out. This will be a better option. And I immediately, at a glance, have this information good to go. The nice thing is I've been showing you all of this in a 3D view. Of course, this is also all achievable in a 2D view. So we're just going to simulate that by going to my document browser. In this specific Revit file, I also had different sheets for my various floors, so I can review data based on the floor, for example. Close this out, make a simple selection so that we force the viewer to update. And here we go, we can review the information. It's exactly the same in 2D space. Actually, in the 2D sheets, I actually have the information of the office ID in the actual drawing, so I could even remove that from the tooltip and save some real estate there. But in any case, I'm just trying to show how versatile and easy to set up is. I mean, we built all of this in about 15 minutes. The nice thing is if I wanted to invest a little more time into all of this, I could go ahead and develop a very simple Power App to embed inside of my report, allowing my employees to make their reservations inside of the report, and then my report could be hosted on my website. And in just a matter of moments, I have a fully functional reservation software that I can host on my website, connected to my live database, and I did it all using standard technologies that I'm already familiar with. Okay, why don't I go ahead and save this here. I'm going to save this as occupancy. And we can also, like we did before, publish this report so that all of you can have a look at it and review it and sort of give an idea of some other possibilities. So in this case, what we did is we played more with the marker styles, differentiating from each other and getting even more insight using different icons, for example. Okay, last thing I want to show you is a case of clash detection. So the nice thing of the clash detection, which some of you may be familiar with, let's go ahead and close this up. It is a custom template that we have developed following the feedback of one of our users who were trying to review clash information in their report. And what we did was we set up this template. It's very simple to use. We simply need the path to the extracted information from Navisworks. So we're just going to copy these real quick in here. So let's give it the full path. And actually, the new addition we did is we added this new element smart tag name field. This also is following some feedback from another user who pointed out to us that depending on the settings of your Navisworks installation, if you're using different languages, the field may change, so it might not be item GUID. The idea is that we will be adding to this list, so you can simply select them, or you can go ahead and type in your value if you have one, and then you simply load in, and you can review your clash information directly inside of your model, inside of Power BI. This happened because I have a mismatch of privacy settings. Not a problem. I simply need to reapply my changes. And the nice thing about all of this is that it was created simply after, let's do this, let's go to transform data. We already had all of the bits and pieces to build all of this. All we really had to do was implement the markers inside of the report with the data that was coming from our clash data extraction. Here we go. We just need to ignore the privacy options here. The data set refreshes. Okay, now we can close and apply, refresh all of the data sets. and we're good to go with the actual report. So the beauty of all of this is that once you have a tool like the markers, sky is the limit. You just need to choose what you want to represent. So for example, if we have a look here at the clash detective, we pulled in our information from our clash extracted files. And for example, here we're applying markers on the model. Let's focus in on one of the tests. We're positioning the markers using coordinates, for example, which is something that I mentioned before. Simply by here in the custom visual, we have a data binding for marker position. This is pulling in a coordinates field. We won't get into that, but that was basically coming automatically from Navisworks. We just did some slight formatting tweaks. And we're able like this to pinpoint exactly the position in the model where the clash occurred. Also, we're feeding in data-driven coloring based on the status of the clash. So I immediately know this clash was resolved, this one wasn't. And then we connected that to the tooltips. And in this case, it's not a simple tooltip. We're actually reading a report page, which is giving me extra information about the clash name, the distance, who was managing the clash, and if I have comments, I can list here all the comments that have been inputted into my clash. Okay, so I don't want to go too much into detail about this. We've shown the clash detective example in the past. Just wanted to give you a quick update on that new parameter we put and just showcase how once you have these sort of tools and you learn how to use them, how varied the field is and how many different things you can actually achieve. Now, what we should probably do, I'll just do a quick show you just the last example here. Also, I forgot to mention, some of our clients are already using this clash detective test. So in this case, it's simply a page to review if there have been errors importing the data. So sort of more of a debugging page of the report. So keep in mind, some of our clients are currently using this today. If you're interested and you don't have access to it, please reach out to us, either to myself or Francisco Necciari, my colleague. You can find us on LinkedIn, or you can contact us through our website. And you can simply hit us up and say, hey, I'd like access to the clash detection template, and we'll be happy to add it to your account so you can actually play around with it and see if it's useful for your business. Okay, so why don't we switch over to the actual questions? So we're just gonna go through a couple of them as fast as we can, and hopefully we get to all of them. Otherwise, as always, we'll reach out to you after the session, either through email or on LinkedIn to get you answers. Okay, so let's go ahead and review the questions. I'll pull them up. Okay, so first question. You have been using Autodesk Data Visualization API, right? Will you also release heat maps in Vcad? Okay, so yes, this is more of a technical question from someone who is a bit in the game. We are definitely using the new Autodesk Data Visualization APIs. That leveraging this technology is what is actually allowing us to manage the markers in this way. And included in that API is also the technology to do heat maps. So also, as you may have seen in some of our promotional videos in the past, we are working on heat maps, and they will be coming actually in the next release. We're focusing fully on heat maps. Okay, another question. Hi, Nicola. Thank you. Hi. Thank you for the presentation. My doubt is about the tooltips. Could I use the tooltips in my model without need to use the Forge Autodesk? No, actually, this is related to the previous question. Because we are leveraging Autodesk, well, Forge's APIs to render the markers. As of right now, they are only available for the Forge viewer. We have on we're looking into the feasibility of implementing those in the open source viewer, but as of right now, they're only available for the Forge viewer. Okay. So can markers be used in a real-time IoT scenario in Power BI? Yes. So we have actually some examples of this happening. The idea is that you simply have your markers and you can set up an auto-refreshing Power BI report, which is constantly pulling in data through a data stream. And that data stream can then be represented on the markers. And you can do things like dynamically change the marker icons to maybe signify some information, or simply feed data to the tooltip in real time, or even do something even more fancy like move a marker based on varying coordinates over time. There's a bunch of different possibilities in that case. And we are planning on exploring some of those and maybe showing you some of those in the future, either through some videos that we have in the makings, or also in the future we're planning on writing other articles to put on our website. So keep an eye out for that. There's a bunch of markers material coming your way. Is it possible to use markers with DWG files? Yes, it is possible. The functionality kind of looks like what I showed you before. So when I switch from the 3D view to the 2D view, it basically looks like the 2D view. It works just the same. Are you planning to do something similar to clash detection for issues as well? Okay, this is a very interesting question. So the very quick answer is you can definitely do it right now, even without needing any updates from our part. If you pull in the information of the issues into your report, you can already connect that to the model and render conditionally your model based on the issues. We have, I think, 1 or 2 clients that are working on something like that. That aside, we do plan in the future to explore more the issue APIs from Autodesk, both in BIM 360 and some other systems that they have to pull in that information when you're generating the templates, for example. That is one of the ideas we're working on. So it's coming down the line, something we're working on. We do not have a release period in mind yet, but it's definitely an avenue that we are exploring at the moment. For which file formats can I use markers? Okay, so markers are available, as I said before, using the Forge viewer with Revit files. It's the example I showed you, but they're also available with Navisworks files, with Dwg files, and with IFC files also. So feel free to play around and experiment with any of those. Hi, I missed the very first minutes. Have you explained how to apply markers to a specific set of elements, not every single element in my model, but just walls, for example, of walls which are of a specific type? Thank you very much. Yes, so I may not have gone into too much detail about this. The simple solution is basically markers are displayed either through coordinates, like we do in a clash detection, or using the geometric center of an object. And so they are conditionally shown based on the selections of those objects. Basically, if you can connect your data to these specific walls that you're talking about, you can simply only show the markers for the walls that you have selected in the visual. It kind of works like highlighting works in Vcad. So how you can highlight only a subset of objects, in the same way you can apply markers to a subset of objects. The functionality, or not the functionality as much as the thinking and the logic is the same. Okay. Next up. So can I use markers in Vcad standalone or only in Vcad for ACC? Okay, so you can definitely use Vcad using the standalone file manager. So the integration with Autodesk Construction Cloud and Autodesk BIM 360 are not necessary. The only caveat, like I was saying before, is to be able to use the markers, you do need to be using the Forge viewer, which is available also in the standalone version of the Vcad file manager. Okay, let me just stretch this out a little so I can read better. Okay. Is it possible to use a 3D and a 2D view with the same markers in the same? Oh, yes. So I guess this maybe someone came in a little later. It's kind of like the example I was showing before. So we switched from a 3D view to a 2D view. Right now, what you saw me do is I switched using the document browser plugin of Forge. I'll give you a bit of a sneak peek. We're actually working on extending that functionality and allowing users to manage the switching from one view to another, for example, inside of Vcad. So without using the Forge extension, but using Vcad standard configuration and things like that. Okay, so I think we are good to go. Let me just check real quick if I missed any questions. No, okay. So it looks like I covered everything this time. Good. Usually don't get enough time to get to every single question. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today in this presentation. Hopefully it was instructive. Hopefully it gets you a little excited about using the new markers. One thing to note, as I mentioned, the markers have been added with the last release, which happened last week, which means that the new templates that you're downloading since last week already are updated to the version 1.3 of Vcad and already have access to the markers. So definitely, if you haven't, go ahead and download those new templates, or if you need access to the custom visual directly to update pre-existing reports, reach out, get in touch with us to do that. All the same, we'll be happy to help you out. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna go ahead and close this all. Thank you very much. You have our connections here on screen, and hope to talk to everyone soon.